Hey, welcome back. Today I've got 5 quick tips to help you to improve your guitar tone, either for free or very affordable options. By the way, stick around for the last one because it's one that most people overlook. First off, before we get into today's tips, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for all the kind words that have been said over the years about my guitar tone. When someone, and I do mean anyone, stops by and takes the time to give one of the greatest compliments that a guitarist can receive, it truly does mean a lot, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you very much. Now, with that said, there also have been some concerns in the comment section from folks that feel as if getting great tone is sort of out of reach because the gear is just too expensive. And I get that, believe me. So today we're going to talk about some ways that you can get closer to that tone that you're chasing without going broke in the process. Now, right out of the gate, I have to preface this video by saying that a great tone isn't just about the gear. It's also about understanding how to use the gear that you already have. So hopefully these quick tips that I'm about to share will help you to dial in your best guitar tone. All right, so tip number 1 for improving your guitar tone, and this one will be free, and that is your volume and your tone knobs. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see guitarists make is actually ignoring their volume and their tone knobs. Most players leave them cranked up all the time, and I get it, it's just easier that way. But the truth is, these are powerful tone shaping tools, especially with a responsive amp or a drive pedal just after your guitar. For example, guys like Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck, for instance, have mastered riding the volume knob to clean up an overdrive tone without switching channels or even hitting a pedal at all. If you want to explore this option, I would encourage you to try this. Set your amp or your pedal to the edge of breakup where it's just starting to distort when you hit hard. Next, roll your volume knob down to about 6 or 7 and notice how that it cleans up. Conversely, roll it back up for solos and you've got dynamic control without ever touching your pedal board at all. Likewise, your tone knob is just as useful. Strat players like Eric Johnson, for instance, like to roll back their tone knob on their bridge pickup to smooth out those harsh highs that you sometimes get from the bridge pickup position. And a quick pro tip, as an option for tonal adjustment, you can also swap out your volume in your tone pots depending on what kind of a sound that you're going for. Now, these pots, as most people call them, are actually called potentiometers, and they're available in different resistance values determined by their alphanumerical value. For instance, the K in the 250K or 500K pots stands for kilo ohms, which is a unit of electrical resistance. That said, a 250K is equivalent to 250,000 ohms, a 500K, 500,000 ohms, and a 1 meg or 1 mega ohm is equivalent to 1 million ohms. So what does all this mean? Well, this resistance value determines how much of the high frequencies are allowed to pass through versus how much gets bled off to the ground. Lower values, for example 250K, let more highs escape, creating a warmer, darker tone, common in strats and tellies. Higher values, for example the 500K or the 1 meg options, retain more highs, therefore resulting in a brighter, more open tone, which is common in humbucker-equipped guitars. So to simplify this even further, essentially the pot acts like a treble filter, influencing your guitar's overall brightness. That in turn can affect how bright or how dark your guitar sounds by controlling how much high-end frequency is being allowed to pass through or bleed off the ground, as said before. So practically speaking, a Fender Strat with 250K pots, if swapped out for a 500K, would become noticeably brighter and possibly even more harsher. A Gibson Les Paul with 500K pots, which is what they usually come standard with, may sound crisp and clear, but if you switch to a 250K, that guitar would then maybe sound darker or more muted. And if your guitar sounds too dull, for instance, the 500K pots and the Les Paul just aren't doing it for you, you can swap out those pots for a 1 meg and that can actually add more clarity and presence. Another quick tip, if you want to test out how different pot values may affect your tone without soldering at all, then try this. Roll your tone knob down ever so slightly. This will mimic what a lower value tone pot would do. Okay, now we could talk swapping out electronics all day and pairing capacitors and resistors to further even shape your tones, but just keeping in mind that swapping out pots is an affordable and effective way to tweak your guitar's character without having to change your pickups. So if you're looking for more warmth, brightness, or control, it's worth experimenting. Okay, quick tone tip number 2, EQ before gain. Now, a lot of players will crank up their gain to get sustain, but too much gain also actually kills definition. Now, before reaching for the gain knob, dial in your EQ first. Think about the guitar tones of David Gilmour or John Mayer. They're rich, they're dynamic, they're full of character, and yet they're never buried in distortion. Now, here's a great way to find your sweet spot. Start with everything at noon, your bass, your mids, and your treble. Cut out your boomy lows, especially if you're playing live, where too much low end can actually muddy up the mix even more. And then tame those harsh highs that can make your tone feel a bit brittle. Now focus on the middles, because this is where your guitar sits in a mix. Try to dial that in to where it just sounds just right to you. Now, a great tone isn't just hearing the right frequencies, it's also cutting out what's unnecessary so that your guitar can breathe. All right, quick tone tip number 3 is stacking drives the right way. Instead of using just one high gain pedal, try stacking 2 lower gain drives on top of each other. Now, players like Stevie Ray Vaughan and John Mayer and Eric Johnson again have built their signature tones by layering gain stages instead of relying on just one single source of distortion. Now, here's why it works. A light overdrive, like say for instance a tube screamer, into a mid-amp breakup gives you a natural sustain without getting muddy. Using 2 gain pedals lets you mix and match textures, like using a transparent boost to push an already warm overdrive pedal. So try this setup. For instance, set one pedal with just a little bit of grit, low gain, higher volume. Now stack another drive pedal on top to add sustain and thickness. Use your volume knob then, as we talked about earlier, to clean it up as needed. If you do this properly, this gives you more control and it keeps your tone dynamic and clear instead of getting lost in sort of like a wall of fuzz. Now, if you don't own any pedals whatsoever, there are still affordable and free options for this tip, and that would be to actually download some free plugins. There's a lot of great ones out there where you can stack different gain pedals on top in a digital realm. All right, quick tone tip number 4 is ambient control. Delays and reverbs can be your friend or they can be your enemy. Now, reverb and delay are incredible when used tastefully, but they can easily wash out your tone if overdone. Now, guitarists like The Edge from U2 and David Gilmour, again, are masters of using delay and reverb as part of their tone, not just as an effect, but as sort of what is baked into what makes them them. Now, here's a way to keep these effects under control. Use a delay instead of a reverb in a live setting. It keeps things clear while adding the depth that you're still looking for. And if using reverb, dial back the decay so that it doesn't turn into a mushy mess. Likewise, try setting the delay so that it's felt more than it's heard. And this will keep your attack intact while still adding the space that everyone loves. So as you can hear, a little space can make your tone bigger, but too much can actually bury your guitar in the mix. Okay, and here's one of the most overlooked tone tips, and this is tone tip number 5, and that is pick attack and dynamics. Your hands are the biggest factor in your tone. I mean, how many times have you been researching online and someone said the tone is all in the fingers, the tone's all in the hands? There's actually something to that. The way you pick, hard or soft, close to the bridge or near the neck, it completely changes the sound. So think about guys like Mark Knopfler, for instance, who are able to get that smooth, expressive tone just by using their fingers, while someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan literally digs in until his fingers are bleeding with heavy gauge strings for that fat, aggressive attack that is so synonymous with his tone. Here's a quick demonstration that I would like for you to try even now if you have your guitar with you. I want you to play the same lick softly and then really dig in and notice how the tone changes. Now, pick closer to the bridge for a brighter cutting sound and move your picking hand toward the neck and notice how much warmer and rounder the tone feels. Oh, and in addition to this tip, you have to add the fact that the pick you choose makes a huge difference as well. For instance, my pick of choice is a Dunlop Tortex Jazz 3 1mm. Now, this has a slightly duller attack than most people are okay with, and compared to your typical thin plectrum material, it's actually a little bit darker sounding, but it's a sound that I feel like works for me. Hey, while you were watching this video, were there some tone tips that you were thinking of that were free or affordable that I didn't talk about? I would ask you to please include those in the comment section down below. That way we can all learn from the community collectively. Until next time, remember that we can dream alone, we can even create alone, but together we can achieve so much more.